Hello, folks, and welcome to a new episode of the Horror Countdown Podcast. I'm your host, Don Anelli, and with me tonight is my special guest, Sean of the Frighternity Podcast.
How's it going, Don? Pleasure to be here tonight.
Oh, great. Thank you for joining me here tonight.
Well, thank you for
For
having me.
our. Uh, well, yeah, it's great to have you on board. For tonight's episode, we're going to be talking our top 10 romantic horror films. So, since this was your topic, what was the general inspiration behind the topic, and anything else you want to talk about in terms of shaping your list?
Well, to me, Don, romance is one of the unsung themes in horror in general. You often get some form of romance in all the genres and subgenres of horror. So, I just wanted to celebrate that. I thought it would be intriguing to do, and I thought it would allow us to have a varied list of a top 10. There's so much to choose from that could feature romance. So that's what I went for. I just tried to make lists that featured romance that really spoke to me. I will say one thing I did, because when you think of romance and horror, I think a lot of people are going to go towards vampires. So I specifically excluded vampires from my top 10 list. Not to say there aren't great romantic vampire horror films, but I wanted to shine a light on other areas. So that was the one handicap I gave myself when making the list. But other than that, I can't wait to hear your list. My list is pretty all over the place, to tell you the truth.
Ah, nice. I kind of excluded vampires from my list just because I didn't think there's any good ones.
Right, right.
So,
Okay.
it's not that I never excluded them. They were just out of the running because I don't really find any of them that good.
Cool.
Um, I I could have included. There was a couple that I probably could have included, but they're not necessarily romance. They're more of the softcore variety or lesbian-centered vampires.
Ah, yeah.
So
They're
that was kind of a. So yeah, that was kind of another thing that was running around, but I didn't necessarily think that they were true genre fair in the strictest sense of the word, so I never really bothered with them. But yeah, for my list, it wasn't that I excluded them. I don't really like too many of them. So
Gotcha. Yeah,
yeah, we're
vampires
not gonna
aren't a
have.
big thing for me either, so I don't blame you, Don.
Yeah, they're kind of like on the lower end of the scale for me in terms of the genre creatures. I am a vampire guy, but you kind of have to do a lot to win me over. So
Yeah, we're on
um,
the same page.
yeah,
Trust me.
like I said, it's not because. Yeah, what I'm just saying is that I didn't specifically exclude them. It's just I didn't find too many that were that good. But yeah, that was another thing for me was I wanted to take a look at how the romance played a role in shaping up the film. So it wasn't just whether or not the romance is included in the film, it's how it shapes the film. So that was also kind of another real factor for me in how I did my list is because you know it, I'm trying to word this correctly without kind of giving my list away, but if I don't really like the film, and there's a couple of these on my list that I'm not really a fan of, the fact that there's actually a determined effort to put a romance front and center in the film is kind of where I went with it. So I kind of made the ploy of if you stripped away all the violence and the gore, would this play on Hallmark? And that was kind of the way I went about it. So,
Awesome. I'm intrigued. I can't wait to hear your list.
all right. Well, if that's the case, let's get started with your number 10.
My number 10 is Shaun of the Dead. And I have to tell you, Don, when this movie came out, this was my movie. I've been a lifelong horror fan, and my name is Sean, and here we had Shaun of the Dead. Never mind the small technicality that I spell my name differently. I'm not letting that stop this from being my movie. But I have to say that when I went and saw this in the theater, I was actually dating a girl named Liz at the time. And when we found out that it was Sean and Liz, I remember distinctly us turning our heads and looking at each other like, you've got to be kidding. Are you kidding me? Because she already heard me say how much this was my movie. And as far as I can recall, this has to be the first, if not one of the first, romantic comedy horror films.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Sean as well. It didn't make my list, but it's an honorable mention actually. It's not that I don't. It's not that I. It's not that I love the film. I'm a huge fan. It's one of my favorite films of all time. But yeah, for me, like I said, because I kind of geared this towards how romance is played up in the film, it kind of drops it in the second act once they're rescued. So it's not necessarily that runs throughout the film as a whole, but it's more just it's front and center in the first part, and like it drives the film at the beginning, but then it kind of just like drops it at the end, like in the second half once they rescue her, because then it's just a matter of survival. But even though I kind of dropped it for that reason, I still have it very high on my list. It's probably if we were ranking a little higher, I would have had it maybe 11 or 12. But yeah, it's up there for me. I'm a huge fan of it as well.
Yeah, it's coming in at number 10 for me too because I feel in the first half it leans very heavily on the romance comedy aspect and almost to where it's like I want romance in my horror, not horror in my romance. So that's why it only clocked in at 10 for me.
Yeah, that's understandable. Yeah, I can see that. So for me, for my number 10 film, kind of what I was saying earlier. I'm not necessarily that much of a fan of the film, but I do like its portrayal of romance. I went with 2015's The Love Witch. So
Oh
the
man,
main
I
thing.
almost watched that one, but I haven't
What
seen it
was it?
yet.
Oh, you haven't seen it
I
yet?
have not seen this one yet.
Oh, okay. So then I'll kind of be a little brief about it. So the film involves this woman who practices witchcraft and is attempting to use her witchcraft spells on various men she comes across as a means of trying to find a perfect husband. And she uses the spells to like make men fall madly in love with her. But then as soon as she finds out that the spells are going awry, she ends up having to kill them in order to be rid of them in their devotion to her. And she moves on to the next one and the next one and the next one and so on and so forth. So the whole thing is basically it's played out as her trying to figure out how to land a perfect husband and land a mate and all of these things that she thinks she wants. But and I'm trying to like be as vague and non-spoilery as I can. I don't the politics she goes through. Search. There's a lot of weird and kind of unusual. I'm trying to figure out the term here. There's a lot of weird gender politics in play. The idea of trying to use this witchcraft as a means of landing a man, but then not knowing what to do with him once she's actually successful at it. So it's kind of one of those where she's trying to be a feminist, but then she's actually not because she's doing something the wrong way and she's not really. And all of this other kind of stuff. It's kind of a weird thing, and I like I said, I don't really like the politics at play here, and it just makes for a rather off-putting time. A 2 hour running time also doesn't really hurt, and that's a side issue. But in terms of the entire film serving as a means of her going through this long-winded journey trying to find a perfect mate and using romance and her sexuality as a means of trying to accomplish it, I thought it was perfect for the list. So I left it at number 10. So I guess. All right. So that moves us to your number 9. Okay, I think it's up to you. I said it's number 9.
For my number 9, I'm going with a film I think is highly underrated and overlooked from 2013. It's called Plus One. Have you seen this one, Don?
No, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, this is sort of like a sci-fi horror zoomer version of Can't Hardly Wait. And the main character gets caught kissing another girl by his girlfriend, and that's where the story starts. But it involves all of these teenagers going to a party, and it's not really explained, but some kind of space anomaly causes a fracture in time. And all the revelers at this party, except our main characters, go out back, and suddenly there's two of everyone in different places. So most of the proper timeline is oblivious, but the main characters realize that there's duplicates living out what happened an hour earlier. And the timelines are separated by less than an hour, but every once in a while the past timeline skips forward, so the question becomes what's going to happen when these timelines converge. But more importantly to the romance aspect, the main character, David, tried to make up with his girlfriend and he failed miserably. But now there's another one of her, but also another one of him. So the film asks the questions of what are you willing to do to win back the one you love? Could you harm yourself for love or to erase or even stop previous mistakes from happening all over again? It's not the centerpiece of the movie, but I really enjoy that aspect of it. And this film really has a lot going on, and it's a really fun movie. I'd highly recommend it.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, like I said, I haven't seen this, so I'm definitely gonna have to track this one down. So,
Cool, Don. How about your number 9?
well, it's actually funny that you mention a teen horror film because my number 9 is also kind of a teen horror film. I went a little bit more recently though. I went with 2020's Freaky. So,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
so yeah, like I said, this one, if you don't know me, I kind of go off the beaten path with things, but what I really like about this one is the entire fact that not only is the film centered around her trying to get to her boyfriend, the not the guy the guy to be her boyfriend, but it's also done through the body swapping thing because the romance develops between her as Vincent Vaughn's character interacting with the teenage guy that she as a teen likes as well. So the whole interplay thing is kind of flip flopped in a sense that it's not necessarily what you would expect, but everything still plays out the same exact way. They still go out on the dates, they still interact together, they still, have to fight the killer off and, defend themselves. But it's just you're not expecting it to be done between a grown man and this teenage kid. So it's kind of a little gender. It's kind of not necessarily gender swap, but it's kind of like reversed from the usual sense. But everything else about it still plays out like a general teen romance of her trying to get with this guy, and then trying to use what they learn about each other through the relationship as a means of fighting off the killer that's stalking them. So it's kind of a fun little interplay, and it has like a lot of like really cornier scenes than you would expect, but they tend to play out far more realistically and emotional than you would expect. So I kind of, I really like that about the film, and I absolutely love it. I'm a huge fan of the film, what it does as well, even as its slasher film. So for me, this one was kind of easy to put on the list. 2020's Freaky.
Awesome. Unfortunately, Don, that's another one I've overlooked. I want to see
Uh,
that one because I'm a big fan of Vince Vaughn, and I just kind of overlooked it because I don't always go for the body swap scenario, but I'm definitely gonna have to check this one out now.
yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. It's one of my favorite films of the year, so I would really recommend it. It's a lot of fun. So that moves us on to number 8.
All right, number 8. I don't think my list would be complete without King Kong making an appearance. And I'm going with the 1976 version, but you could really insert any of them here because the tragic romance and beauty killing the beast is the most important constant that runs through all of the King Kong films. Plus, for me, just like I like my kaiju, I prefer my King Kong to be a man in a suit. And that's not to take a swipe at CGI, that's just personal preference. And then this version has Jeff Bridges and Charles Grodin. And for my money, when you take into account when this film came out, I'd argue that it's just as epic in scope as what Peter Jackson did in 2005. And last but not least, Jessica Lange. She is downright enchanting in this movie. Stunningly beautiful. And it's easy to see how beauty did indeed kill the beast.
So I'm gonna say one of the most controversial things ever on a podcast. This is actually my favorite of the three. At least the three adaptations called King Kong in the universe. It's my favorite. I don't say it's the best. I say it's my favorite, and it's actually I saw it first, so I have sentimental attachment to it, and I'm like you, a rubber suited, kaiju lover at heart. Those are the very first films I ever saw as a kid. So again, those are kind of sentimental to me in many ways than one. I never really considered any of them horror films enough to be put on the list, but I'm not mad at all for the inclusion because I definitely see it and I appreciate it. So yeah, nice job there. I mean, like I said, I'm not comfortable enough calling it a horror film to put it on my list, but I definitely think it warrants inclusion. So definitely glad you did.
Right on. Well, I'm glad I pulled a controversial statement from you on your show. And I have to agree, I'm not a King Kong purist. King Kong films are not at the top of my list for enjoyable watches. But if I had to pick one, I think I'm going to go with the 1976 version for sure.
All right. Well, guess that moves on to my number 8. Now, I am 1000% certain you've never even heard of this one. And this is just one of the
The
many
way things are
examples.
going, you're probably right.
Well, like, no, I know where I'm going with this. I went with a 2015 Bollywood film called Alone.
Okay.
So, this is, like I said, it's Bollywood, so this is an Indian horror film. But don't let that mistake you. This is actually really, really good. So, like I said, because not a lot of people have seen it, I'll try to be a little more vague about it. Basically, what happens is there's two sisters. Both of them are conjoined twins, and they grow up together, and they both fall in love with the same guy, but he only likes one of them, not the other. So when he goes away to college, they get the idea that they need to finally separate and be their own individuals, hence the term alone. So that way they can finally be like their true selves, and one gets the guide, one can go on their own separate way. But there's this strange accident, and one of them dies. And now, several years later, as adults, the woman is being haunted by the dead sister, and we don't know why. So it's kind of an unusual choice for this kind of a thing until you realize that the entire idea behind it, and I'm gonna give a slight spoiler here just because the whole thing is about the sisters switching identities. God, that was a mouthful. Um, so who we think we're following is actually not the sister we were told. She assumed the other's identity. And the whole idea is the sister that liked the guy, but he didn't like her, is actually taking the place of the sister who did like him. So she died, not the one that didn't, that he, like I said, it's complicated and I'm trying to be vague about this, but like I said, he only liked one sister. The sister he liked is the one that died, but we're led to believe the one that he didn't like was the one that died. So they switched lives, and the entire idea of her coming back from the grave is trying to win him back. They're not there to. She's not there to haunt and kill him. She's just there to take her place as being alongside of him once again. And as time goes on, he gradually discovers that's been the whole point of the hauntings all along. So, like I said, in terms of this being kind of, for this romance thing, the whole idea of coming back from the dead and haunting your sister to get back with the guy that you originally loved in the first place but didn't know that you died and who had assumed your place is kind of one of those, that kind of seems like a tragic story that definitely deserves to be highlighted in this kind of a situation. So I kind of had to, I put this on my list and uh, made my number eight.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like it goes places and takes you places. That
Yeah.
definitely sounds fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole slew of these. I mean, I could probably have made an entire list just centered around romantic horror films from India, but I kind of figured that wouldn't be all that fun because nobody would know what I'm talking about. So I ended up putting my favorite one on the list. This one's actually really good. I found it on YouTube a while ago. I don't know if it's still up. Um, I will say this: be warned. The film clocks over 2 hours and 10 minutes, and yes, it's Indian, so expect musical numbers. If you're going into it, expect musical numbers. So, that's kind of one of those, if you've seen those kinds of gifts floating around, this isn't one of them, but it does have those kinds of elements in the film. So be warned. And like I said, it clocks over 2 hours. So, get your big boy pants on. It is subtitled. So, you gotta have to deal that. You're gonna have to deal with it, being as long as it is, and you're gonna have to deal with the musical numbers. But if you're into it, it's a lot of fun, and it has a lot I like about it. So number eight for me is Alone. So yeah, that gives us your number seven.
All right, for me, number 7 is going to be Bug. It's a classic story. Girl meets boy. Girl and boy connect through mutual loneliness. They get romantic and fall madly in love with one another. But boy winds up being a schizophrenic who suffers from paranoid delusions of bugs implanted in his body. But the girl is so lonely that she becomes codependent and enables this self destructive behavior until it ruins them both. I think Bug is such an underrated psychological thriller. And this film is so great at showing the destructive power of love and romance when desperation and mental illness are involved. We may be discussing horror films that feature romance, but more often than not, these romances usually end in tragedy. And that is fitting for the genre. But yeah, number 7 for me, Bug. I just love everything about that movie.
Oh, okay. For me, I've not really seen. I haven't seen this. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I'm not really the strongest fan of psychological horror. So it was kind of one that's slipped through the cracks, just because that was what I was hearing when it first came out. But I know a lot of people have been kind of coming to its defense a lot recently, so it's definitely something that I'm gonna want to revisit. So, not bad. So,
Yeah, I'm a big fan of William Friedkin, so I'd recommend checking it out if you like some of his other work.
cool. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I know it's kind of gotten a lot of fans recently, so definitely gonna have to look into it when I can. All right. So, with that being my number seven, I'm kind of gonna leave the off the wall films alone for a while. I'm kind of gonna go with a little bit more mainstream and a little bit more recognizable. I'm gonna go with 2008's "Let the Right One In." So,
Hmm, nice pick.
yeah, I mean, not only is this probably one of my favorite vampire films of all time, and I know I said that kind of earlier that I didn't really have true vampire films earlier, but this was kind of the one exception. Just because to me this is easily the best vampire film of the last 30, 40 years. I mean, I could probably make a case that it's the best one. It's in the top five all time. But the whole point of the film is sort of revealed when you look at the idea that she's grooming him to be her next successor. The whole relationship idea that the whole relationship ploy that they go through is not one in a romantic partner sense, but in a codependent relationship sense. Everything that Eli is doing to Oscar is grooming him to be her next familiar. And it really makes a lot of their interactions feel that much more dark and twisted than what they really are. And it was one of the few readings that I looked at the film and I was like, wow, that really adds an even darker dimension to what's going on. And you already got this bloodthirsty vampire running around killing everyone around town, and then you add into this subplot about her grooming him to be the next one to take her side, not in a vampiric sense, but in a guardian sense. To me, that was one of the best aspects of the film, and it's one of my favorite features about it. Not just what goes on in it, but it's also one of the fun little storylines that you get involved in the film. So yeah, for me, this was number seven. Let the right one in.
Great choice. Well said. And believe it or not, I had a feeling it would be making an appearance. It didn't make my list, but I thought it'd be out there in one of our lists.
All right, so that brings us to number six.
Well, I'm not going way out there, but I am going to be picking a trauma film because I found that I couldn't complete this list without showering some love on trauma. I grew up with the Toxic Avenger and Toxic Crusaders cartoon. Then in the 2000s, I discovered trauma again because I found a copy of Citizen Toxie at a Best Buy. And then I started going through their catalog. I fell in love with films like Terror Firmer, Tromeo and Juliet, Troma's War, or Class of Nukem High. And I get that trauma films aren't for everyone. They're definitely an acquired taste. But I love and respect Lloyd Kaufman. And when my love was strongest for trauma and I was really into them, I think it's undeniable that Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, was and possibly still is the pinnacle of Lloyd Kaufman's decades of independent filmmaking. It's such a love letter to trauma itself while also being a wildly original movie. And at the heart of it is the love story between Arby and Wendy. Not that it isn't loaded with plenty of politically incorrect humor, plenty of nudity, toilet humor, buckets of gore, incredible practical effects, chicken zombies. Now, you might scoff at the idea of a trauma film delivering a touching romance tale or a good movie, but I implore you to go to YouTube and listen to the song Slow Fast Food Love and tell me it doesn't deliver the laughs and the feels. Oh, yeah, it's a musical. It is a musical, like one of your choices. So, Yeah, the love story in Poultrygeist. I love Trauma. I love this movie. So that's my number 6.
Nice. I'm a huge fan of that one as well. I never considered it. It for some reason I don't even know why I never thought of including it on the list, but now that it's been out there, I probably should have. Um, yeah, this is my hands down absolute favorite trauma film as well. Not that I've seen their entire catalog. I've seen bits and pieces here and there. So there's a lot of missing holes in their collection that I really need to get to. Just lack of time, lack of availability being a big issue. But from what I've seen, they're hit and miss. But this was so much a hit that I fell in love with it the second I first saw it. So yeah, that one probably should have made my list. Now that I think about it, I don't know why it never registered, but solid choice. Kind of makes my
Thank you.
kind of makes my number six feel a little weird. Um, my number six is 2013's Warm Bodies. So
Excellent choice.
yeah, this was another one that I'm not the biggest fan of. It's a lot better than I ever would have thought it was. I ever would have thought. I'll admit that it's got its moments, and I like what it does, but the fact of intruding including the romance into a zombie viral outbreak, and the whole ploy of love rendering the virus inert just kind of feels like a cheat, and it kind of like undoes a lot of like the fear and menace of what's going on, and it just kind of like leaves a sour taste in the film for me. But that being said, the whole film is a romance that develops between a woman and a zombie. So it's kind of hard to, not fall under the auspices of what we're doing here, because the film's set up to be exactly that. It's a, in this day and age, being politically correct, it's an interspecies, relationship. And the whole idea of this whole war being started, and, humans versus zombies, all that kind of stuff is, put to the background when you realize that it's, a romantic relationship that develops. So, like I said, yeah, it's kind of a weird choice going after Trauma, like a PG-13 mainstream Hollywood movie, sharing side by side with Poultrygeist. But yeah, kind of hard for me to leave this one off the list. Number six for me is Warm Bodies.
Hey, I blind bought Warm Bodies when it came out, and I was
I did too,
pleasantly
yeah.
surprised by that movie. I thought it was actually way better than it had any right to be. It does kind of it does have a cop out at the end, but I really enjoyed it. I haven't watched it in a long time. It did not make my list, but spoiler alert, there is zombie human love coming up on my list.
Hmm. Well, a spoiler alert, so's mine. So, moving on to number five.
All right. Number 5 on my list goes to David Cronenberg's remake of The Fly. The Fly is so great in so many different ways, but I think it's an undeniable fact that it wouldn't be as great as it is were it not for the incredibly tragic romance between Seth and Ronnie. It'd undoubtedly still be a great film, but it wouldn't be as great if you ask me. And you have Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum, and they're just magnetic. I mean, they were magnetic in this film, off screen. They were even able to pull off a believable romance in Earth Girls Are Easy, for crying out loud. And then you watch Seth go through what he's going through, and you see Ronnie stick by his side and attempt to help him through incredibly difficult circumstances. And not to mention, she has to deal with her own problems with her scorned lover in a hostile work environment, and then a pregnancy with terrifying possibilities. She's such a strong female character here. But sadly, like we've already discussed, Romance in horror often leads to tragedy, and this romance provides us one of the most tragic moments, not just in horror, but cinematic history.
Wow, I thought I wasn't gonna make two controversial statements on one show, but here we are. I'm not a fan of Cronenberg, like, at all. Like, this is really the only film of his that I actually like. I never really thought of this one for the list, just because that's the one area of the film that I have the most issue with. I don't really buy their relationship that much. Um, so yeah, it's kind of I mean I understand why you get it, and I understand the appeal behind it, but that was one of my issues because it just felt so forced, and there were so many red flags that just go unignored that it felt a little it felt like it was pushing the narrative rather than actually feeling genuine for me. But I understand the inclusion. It's just I've never really liked that aspect of the film. I never really thought it went anywhere. And then yeah, my general dislike of Cronenberg in general. So
Right on. Hey, that's fair. To each their own, right?
I mean, like I said, I never thought I'd have to make two controversial statements in one show, but
I'm happy to help, Don. I'm happy to help.
all right. So moving on to my number five. I think I'm kind of getting tired of doing these mainstream films. I'm gonna go back to one of the sleaziest, one of the grimiest, one of the dirtiest films I've ever watched, and I loved every second of it. I'm going with 1979's Beyond the Darkness.
Oh, wow.
So I take it you've seen it then.
Well, what more can I say? Let's hear it, Don.
So, for those that don't know, this is the tale of a man who is trying to get it on with his new wife because it turns out he and his mother have turned his ex wife into a corpse that the three of them share a relationship with. I mean, him, his mother, and the corpse. I don't mean the wife. I mean, him and his mother share a three-way relationship with the corpse of his ex wife. And yeah, it's kind of gross and grimy, and it's not exactly for the faint of heart, but I'm a fan of this. I love what it does. I love the depravity on display. I love the sickening display of the man's psychological issues going being brought out and explored, and you realize just how depraved and degenerate he is. The relationship that he and his mother have, not just in the bedroom with the corpse, but together. You know, hint, hint. There's incestuousness in the film, which, for those that don't know, kind of attracts me to a film more than anything. But yeah, this is just a twisted gothic love story with absolute depravity and degenerateness on display, and I loved every second of it. So, for those of you with a taste for necrophilia, incestuality, and embalming, which is all on full display here, doesn't hold back, absolutely no sense of squeamishness, just here it is, deal with it. I think this is going to be a film for you. It's kind of one of those that just it doesn't really get talked about much because there's not a lot of easy ways to find it. But if you can, give it a shot because you're gonna enjoy it. I don't know if you're gonna enjoy it, but it's definitely gonna leave you with something afterwards.
That is such a good choice. I'm a fan. Love it. And it just proves, Don, romance in horror takes you places. They might not, they it might not be somewhere you want to go, but I think you've just proven why this topic is so great.
Mm, yeah. So moving on to number four.
My number 4 just barely missed the top 3, and it's none other than Takashi Miike's Audition. To me, this is the definition of romance horror, and how I wish I could have gone into this blind. because by the time I was able to learn about this movie and get the opportunity to watch it, the proverbial finger missing and tongue lacking man was out of the bag. The real problem with having the knowledge of the awaiting horror in Audition is it detracts from appreciating the first 45 minutes of this film. Your anticipation winds up distracting you from this expertly crafted experience. And that's the best way to describe this movie is it's an experience. It definitely took me some views over a decade to truly appreciate the sleight of hand that gets used here. Takashi Miike is a true master, just a wizard of filmmaking. And once I was really able to settle into this film's groove and experience and appreciate it as a whole, and not just a sum of its parts, it just blew my mind.
Nice, yeah. I'm a fan as well, although it's been a lot. It's been a long time since I've seen it. So yeah, this kind of slipped my mind. It was another one, kind of like Shaun of the Dead, that it just slipped my mind, and it was like, okay, why wasn't this on the list? But yeah, I love it as well. I much prefer the second half to this rather than the first for exactly those reasons. But to say much more, I'd probably want to be a little bit more familiar with it. But yeah, it's another great choice. Another one that like I said, I wish I had kind of thought of. But yeah, in terms of the film itself, I'm a huge fan as well. So
Awesome.
yeah.
How about your number four,
So
Don?
my number four is another one off the beaten path. In fact, we're going so off the beaten path, we're heading to Thailand. This is 2019's Crossu Inhuman Kiss. So, this one concerns a young man who lives in this remote village who tries to win the heart of this woman that lives on the outskirts. Her and her family are kind of ostracized. They live there, but they're not necessarily considered as welcomed into the community as a lot of other people around them are. And the closer he gets to them, the closer he realizes that the reason for their ostracis- ostracization is due to her condition that transforms her into a Penanggalan. So a Penanggalan is a creature in Asian mythology. It's an actual thing. It's not something that's made up. It's a woman. It's usually a woman, and they're normal from the head up, but the head down is completely different. What happens is they go around the day looking like a regular person, but at night the head detaches from the body and drags the entire spinal column with it, dragging all of the intestinal organs and liver, intestines, and stomach, and all that kind of stuff. And it detaches and flies around and just, travels through the countryside feasting on, blood to drink. And it's been used in several films. It's not one that I think a lot of American audiences would be familiar with. The closest one I can imagine American audiences may know is a film from Indonesia called Mystics in Bali. But this is actually the Thailand version. The Thailand version of the creature is called Krasu. That's where it gets its name. And like I said, it's spread in various various regions in Asia. There's a version in Cambodia. There's a version in Laos, and I believe there's another version in either Malaysia or the Philippines. I'm not terribly familiar with films from those part of the regions, but it's generally around in that part of the area, and it's all the same thing. This headless flying head, this bodiless flying head. Sorry, that drags the intestinal tract and all of the various organs around on top of this floating head. Um, and the whole thing with this film is that he's trying to save her from the village because she's being condemned for all of these various animal attacks and mysterious murders that are going on, but he's not willing to believe it because he's in love with her and he's trying to save her and trying to keep her alive, not knowing what she really is. But yeah, this is really good. I really enjoyed it. It should be available on Netflix to find. So if you see it, go ahead and give it a watch. But yeah, this one, not just because the entire thing is centered on a teen romance, but it's also a genuinely good film, and I'm a huge fan of it. I went with 2019's Crossu Inhuman Kiss.
Wow. I am gonna have to check this out.
Yeah.
Awesome pick, Don.
Yeah. Like I said, I go off the beaten path with these things. So,
Well, you're helping me expand
um,
my horizons in horror, and my horizons are pretty big,
yeah.
but you're giving me some things to watch, that's for sure.
Happy to help out. So that moves us to our top three.
All right. For my number three, this film features who I would consider my living dead girl, and I'm talking about Return of the Living Dead 3. Because is there a better Romeo and Juliet style romance that features zombies than this? And we've already discussed Warm Bodies. It's a good movie, but if I'm having to choose, I'm choosing Return of the Living Dead 3 every single time. This movie was just perfect for me because the original Return of the Living Dead is one of my all-time favorite films, and I love almost everything. Well, yeah, I love everything Brian Usna does. And I really fell in love with these characters. J. Trevor Edmund is awesome. He grounds the film and really holds it together. I wish we got more of him in the genre because we get to see him again in Pumpkinhead 2 and ever so briefly in Lord of Illusions. And it's just a shame that that's all we got because he's always great. And then you have Melinda Clarke. What a stunner. She's beautiful in this film. And what a trooper, too, because she goes all in on this role. And obviously, it's not the easiest role. If you've seen the makeup on the cover, you know. And she really demonstrates some Barbara Crampton levels of being game through all of it. So I adore her for that, and I applaud her for that. And I just think it's a film that's more than worthy of high praise, especially in regards to our theme here of romance within the horror genre. So yeah, number three, Return of the Living Dead 3.
All right, so it finally happened. We finally crossed over because that's on my list, and I will talk about it at a later time.
Oh, okay, awesome. I was wondering when that
Yeah,
was gonna happen.
yeah. So yeah, like I said, that's on my list, and I'll talk about it at a later time. For my number three, I went with one that I specifically watched for this because it was one that had slipped through the cracks and I'd never seen it before. This was one of the ones that I was mentioned earlier about seeing a film for the first time. I went with 2016 Spring. So, like I said, guess we're gonna have to go with the third controversial statement on the show. I'm not a Benson and Moorhead fan. I really don't like any of their work. Resolution, I kind of turned off halfway through. I was just getting really pissed off and frustrated at it. I'm not the biggest fan of the Endless. I think it just drones on way too long than it really needs to be, and I'm not even interested in Synchronic at all. Um, so this was kind of one that it had slipped through the cracks, and it wasn't really one that I kind of was interested in. But because we were doing the topic, I decided that it was finally time to give it a try and see what it was about. So I'm not the biggest fan of the film. It's probably the one I like the most. I will say that for it. It's the one of theirs that I like the most, mainly because it's the one that I feel is the most complete. It has like the best ideas going on about it. the relationship and all of the mythos and backstory that we get about who she is and what she's gone through over the years, and all these various little tidbits that pop up about her lifestyle and how she's had to learn these things about herself in order to avoid getting found out all these years. I really enjoy all that. I think the relationship and how this grows from their meeting at the bar that one day, and then they're just together the rest of the time, and all of the the various dates and encounters that they have together. I think that's all played out really well, but none of it's really much of a horror film. So that kind of is like the big factor for me, is that very little of this feels like a horror film. So it's, like I said, it's one that I'm kind of not really lukewarm about, but because the entire film is a romance rather than seeing her out and about ripping people to pieces, and adding this what could have been a fun dimension to their relationship is he knows she's a monster. What's going to happen if she decides to let that side loose and start killing people? How's that going to get incorporated into the relationship, and how's that going to change their dynamic? I thought that could have been a lot of fun, and it could have been a good way to inject some actual horror into the elements. But in terms of what we got, it kind of lacks on that aspect for me. But because the film is genuinely about the relationship from start to finish, it made my list, and it's number three. So
I'm not familiar with that film. I think I've seen it when browsing streaming services, but since it's so high on your list, I think I'm going to have to check it out.
yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not much of a horror film. We only probably get maybe a couple of scenes here and there. So for me, that's actually my main issue with it, is that it's not really much of a genre film. But because the entire thing is them being, him trying to romance her and trying to, get together and start this relationship together, to me, it made sense to put it high on the list, because that's essentially what the film is about. And being that it's about a romance, it kind of fits the bill. So, like I said, this isn't in terms of how much I enjoy the film, because, like I said, there's a couple of films on here I don't really like, but because this is about, you know, romance and relationships, it kind of goes high on my list.
Very cool.
So, go to the final gruesome twosome. What's your number two?
I discovered my number two only a few years ago, and it has quickly become one of my all time favorite movies. My number two is Ken Russell's 1984 erotic thriller, Crimes of Passion. I can't begin to describe the ways this movie makes observations on sex, love, intimacy, and relationships, all involving three very uniquely damaged individuals. Kathleen Turner just blows my mind as China Blue, one of my favorite characters. This damaged woman with intimacy issues who moonlights as a hooker in order to have sex without any emotional baggage. That is until she meets Bobby Grady, who becomes entangled in all of this. He's got this dying marriage with a completely checked out wife and two kids. But then there's Anthony Perkins as the Reverend. What can I say about this performance? This is magic on screen. It has to be seen to be believed. It's some of the craziest acting. The scenes between Anthony Perkins and Kathleen Turner are some of my favorite movie moments. It's just completely crazy. Highly recommended.
Nice. I'm gonna have to look into this because I've not seen this or heard of it. So, yeah, this I'm definitely intrigued because it sounds interesting. But yeah, I've never even heard of this.
I think you'd love it, Don. I'm sure you've seen a few other Ken Russell films, Altered States, Lair of the White Worm, but
Yeah.
for my money, this is his masterpiece.
Hmm, cool. Yeah. I mean, I've seen The Devils and I've seen Layer of the White Worm. I think I've seen Altered States, but I can't be sure. Maybe I've seen clips of it and think I've seen it, but I'm gonna have to rewatch it just to know for sure. I know I've seen the transformation sequence, but I don't know if I've seen the rest of the movie. Maybe it's just one of those that, it's been around long enough that I assume I've seen it. So yeah, I like I said, I know I've seen the Devils. I know I've seen Layer of the White Worm. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to track this one down because it sounds pretty cool.
Well, cool, Don. You've given me a lot to watch, so I'm glad I could give you something to check out.
All right, so for my number two, this was another secondary first time watch, and I'm kind of glad I did. Again, it's not one that I would truly classify as a horror film, but I think this one definitely applies. I went with Spontaneous.
Okay.
So, yeah, for those that aren't aware, this is a group of teens in the small town high school who just suddenly start exploding one day. And I mean exploding because all of a sudden they're sitting there and then poof, there's this weird red cloud and a bunch of blood and body parts and other kind of stuff just spraying everything around them. But it's only just them. It's not like there's anything else going on. It's not hitting anybody else. It's not, any of the other areas around, the environments around them. It's just, the students just start exploding. And this one teen and the rest of her friends are quarantined and they're experimented on and they're trying to, figure out what's going on while the various, incidences continue and, there's less and less of them by the day. And, you, you know, they, dev- her and this one other student start to develop this relationship together over the course of these events. And then what's going to happen if, he turns out to fall prey to this or if she falls prey to this and they just explode in front of each other. So not really going to go deeper into spoilers than that, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really like the first two-thirds of this. I think it's all really fun. Not necessarily the strongest ending. The finale kind of leaves me just a little cold, but by and large, I had a lot more fun with this than I expected. The relationship, like I said, is at the whole forefront of the film. It's all about, her coming of age and trying to discover these things about her and what's going to happen if she falls prey to this strange curse or this strange condition or whatever is going on because I'm going to end up spoiling this. That you never really know what's going on. It's never revealed why they're exploding or blowing up or whatever is happening. But yeah, the whole thing about small town teenage romance and them growing up together. To me, it was kind of an obvious inclusion and one that, as soon as I watched it, I felt it was an obvious inclusion. So since it's basically the entire film is a romance, and then there's just two or three incidences of horror around them where these random people just blow up. Number two for me is Spontaneous.
Well, you had me at people blowing up. So that's another one I'm going to have to jot down.
Cool. All right. So it's finally down to the top choice of the evening. Now, unfortunately, mine is revealed for those that are keeping track, but you have me at a disadvantage since you know mine, but I don't know yours. So let's get your number one.
My number one is 1974's Phantom of the Paradise. And I'm going to admit it here. No other genre film has made me cry more than this movie. And I'm not even ashamed to say that. Go watch Jessica Harper perform Old Souls on YouTube and tell me you don't get a bit teary eyed. I dare you. It's part Phantom of the Opera, part Faust, and part Rocky Horror Picture Show, with an incredible soundtrack by Paul Williams, and directed by none other than Brian De Palma. Jessica Harper, William Finley, and Garrett Graham just deliver in this movie. And I love the tragic journey of the Phantom, and it's just played so well. The last sequence in this film is so beautiful, yet so heartbreaking. It's performance art in the truest sense. I can really say no more because I would hate to spoil this one for anyone who hasn't seen it, but you should see it if you haven't. So, my number one, my favorite romantic horror, 1974's Phantom of the Paradise.
Nice. Yeah. I've seen this once. I don't remember much. I do remember a couple of the musical numbers actually being better than I anticipated. I'm pretty sure one of those is the Jessica Harper number you mentioned, but it's been way too long since I've seen it, so I can't comment anymore. But yeah, I'm definitely I do have positive memories of it, if that means anything. So definitely one that I want to revisit. So yeah, like I said, one that I'm not familiar with, but I do have positive enough memories, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. So.
Awesome. Well, we may know your number one, Don, but I'm dying to hear you talk about it.
So yeah, for those keeping track, your number three is my number one, Return of the Living Dead Part Three. So, like I said, the entire thing that I wanted to do with this was how the romance plays a part in the movie as a whole, and the way that this plays the romance is by far my favorite part of the film. So the whole thing is he revives her from the dead because he can't bear to be away from her. And the love that they share and what she's willing to do to try to keep him around makes her go through all of these crazier and crazier things to try to, one, numb the pain from the resurrection, but to prove that she actually does love him. And it just draws her into crazier and crazier situations because the military is trying to come after them for what's going on, and they're trying to keep it all under wraps because all of a sudden the victims that they're encountering are coming back to life and being reanimated, and now there's going to be this whole huge zombie outbreak that they're trying to prevent. And you know at the center of it all is these two kids who just want to be together alone and not worry about anybody else. So yeah, yeah, for me this was kind of an easy choice. This It wasn't really number one until I kind of started putting everything together, but it was always going to be in my top spot. It depended on what I felt with the new watches. Like I said, Spring, Spontaneous, and there's a couple of others that didn't really make my list that were first time watches that I wanted to do for this. But yeah, yeah. Once I started organizing the list, it was pretty easy for me to slot this in at number one. Not just because, like I said, the romance was a central part of the film, and it actually is the driving storyline behind it, but it's a damn good movie too. I mean, you said it best. What she goes through in this film is just absolutely fantastic. That makeup look is just iconic. And then you have Screaming Matt George at the height of his game. Just this to me is just like a notch below Society in terms of like what he does as like a special effects reel. I mean, the stuff in here is just fantastic, and I love the film. So yeah, like I said, it was an easy choice for the top. It was in the top part of the list, but then once I started organizing, it was really easy to just slot this in at number one. So don't have much else to add. Number one for me is Return of the Living Dead 3.
Well said, Don. And the way you talk about how you structured your list, I think it is very deserving of your top spot.
So that brings us to the end of our show. So if we have any other honorable mentions that, like you said, were close to the list but didn't quite make it, go ahead and list them off.
I did have Hellraiser as an honorable mention. Just the romance is a big factor in that film, but it isn't my biggest takeaway, so it didn't make my list for that. And I also put Bram Stoker's Dracula, but like I said, I designed my list not to have any vampires, but I'd be remiss not to mention Bram Stoker's Dracula because that is an epic romantic film.
Nice. So I have a couple of others. You did mention a couple of that. Couple of choices on your list were on my honorable mentions. So the only other one that I had on my honorable mentions list was the vampire film The Hunger.
Okay.
The entire thing is a three-way relationship kind of psychological melodrama. So yeah, I figured that was kind of another obvious choice. It didn't make my list just because I'm not really like I said, another fan of it. So for me, I just kind of left it off just because I didn't really feel like it was deserving of the list. But like I said, definitely one that's still worth mentioning. So yeah,
Awesome.
guess that I guess that wraps us up. So you know, thank you so much for joining me. This was a fun time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Don. I really appreciate it. We love your format. We love everything you do for the horror community and the podcast community over on Twitter. We really love what all everything you do. Believe me, from the bottom of mine and Danny's heart, we love everything you do on Twitter.
Well, thank you so much for that. I mean, I told you guys all about that when I joined you guys last week. So, like I said, definitely doesn't hurt to hear it again. But just happy to help out. So, for those of you that are joining me on this cross promotional thing, go ahead and give your shout outs and let people know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, so I co host Frighternity with my little brother Danny. I've been a lifelong horror fan while my brother is relatively new, but every Friday we relive a different movie and celebrate the genre with a mix of fond memories and fresh perspectives. And if you want to take part in that, and I don't see why you wouldn't, you can find us on Twitter at Frighternity. And you can also find us over on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where we upload previous episodes. So just type Frighternity in that search bar and you'll find us.
Yeah, and I will have everything linked in the show notes down below for you to check out. Hopefully, you will have heard me on there. Like I said, my last episode was the Deathgasm episode, so that should be up there by the time you hear this. So go ahead and give that and the rest of their channel a check out because there's a lot of fun shows there for you to dive in, not just with me, but everything else that they've done. So definitely give them a follow and check their show out. But for now, that will end tonight's show. So until next time, we will have another great topic for you. So see you then.